My mother called me 3 days ago. She said my name wrong. Not mispronounced. Not a nickname. She used the name on my birth certificate, the one before the adoption, the one she never knew. I haven't answered since. I should explain how this started. The station is called Harlan Crossing. You won't find it on most maps because it barely qualifies as a station. It's a concrete platform, a single enclosed waiting room with a ticket window that hasn't sold a ticket in 11 years, and a signal control cabin about 40 meters east. That's where I work. The cabin. It sits between two sets of tracks that run north-south through a valley in western Montana, and my job is to monitor signal changes, log scheduled freight traffic, and radio confirmation to the regional dispatch hub in Missoula when trains pass through. There are 6 scheduled trains per day. 3 northbound, 3 southbound. The first comes through at 4:15 a.m. and the last at 11:40 p.m. Between those, there's a lot of nothing. Wind. The sound of the river about half a mile east. Sometimes elk on the tracks, which means I radio it in and they slow the next freight until the animals move. I took this position because I wanted to be alone. That's the honest answer. After my divorce, after losing the house in Billings, after the thing with my daughter that I'm not ready to talk about yet, I wanted a job where the only expectation was that I watch, and confirm, and log. No conversations. No performance reviews. No eye contact. Harlan Crossing gave me that. For 7 months, it was exactly what I needed. Then in November, the supplemental schedule arrived. Every signal operator in the BNSF regional network receives a monthly dispatch calendar. It's a spreadsheet, train ID numbers, expected tonnage class, time windows for passage, and any special instructions like slow orders or track maintenance flags. Mine came by email from the Missoula hub, usually on the 28th or 29th of the prior month. On November 2nd, I received a second document. It came through the same email system, same formatting, same header, but the sender line read network scheduling, supplemental, and I'd never seen that designation before. It contained 7 additional trains. Not freight. Not passenger. The tonnage column was blank. The train ID numbers were formatted differently, where normal IDs are alphanumeric, like BNSF 7412 or UP 4389, these were just 6-digit numbers with no carrier prefix. 881204, 770318. 630927, like that. The time windows were all between midnight and 4 a.m. And the special instructions column, which on the normal calendar might say something like, slow order MP 47 to 52 or, crew change at Whitefish, said the same thing for all 7 entries. Do not signal. Do not log. Confirm passage to supplemental dispatch only. There was a phone number. Not a radio frequency, a 10-digit phone number with a 406 area code. Montana. I assumed it was a mistake. Some internal routing error that sent a test document to an active station. I forwarded it to my supervisor in Missoula, a guy named Dale Kirchner who I'd spoken to maybe 4 times total, and asked if the supplemental schedule was intended for me. He called me back within 20 minutes. Dale had never called me before. Our entire relationship was email. Where did you get this? He asked. I told him. Don't forward it again, he said. Don't share the phone number. If the trains come through, do exactly what the document says. Nothing more. So it's real. There was a pause long enough that I checked if the call had dropped. The trains are real, Dale said. Whether they exist is a different question. He hung up. The first one came through 8 days later. November 10th, 1:47 a.m. I want to describe this carefully, because the experience of it is the part that matters, not just the fact of it. I was in the signal cabin. The cabin has 3 windows, one facing the northbound track, one facing the southbound, one facing the platform and waiting room. There's a desk with 2 monitors, one showing the signal status board for my section of track and one connected to a camera feed from the platform. There's a radio unit, a desk phone, and a space heater that barely works. At 1:30 a.m., I was reading. The last scheduled train had passed at 11:42 p.m., 2 minutes late, logged normally. Nothing was expected until 4:15 a.m. Outside, the temperature was 22 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. There was no wind. The valley gets this quality of silence in late autumn that's almost pressurized, like the air itself is holding still. At 1:41 a.m., I felt the desk vibrate. It was faint. Not the heavy, rolling tremor of a freight train, those you feel in your chest from a quarter mile out. This was a hum. Constant and thin, like a phone on vibrate buried under a pillow. I put my hand flat on the desk surface and the vibration was steady. It didn't pulse. It didn't grow. It just was. I looked at the signal board. All green. No train in my block, no train in the adjacent blocks north or south. The system showed nothing. At 1:44 a.m., I heard the rails. If you've worked near tracks, you know the sound. Steel contracts and expands. But it also sings when something is on it, a faint, rising tone that travels ahead of the train through the rail itself. You can hear a freight coming almost 2 minutes before you see it. This sound was wrong. It was coming from both directions. North and south, simultaneously. The same tone, the same pitch, converging on the station. I stood up and looked out the north-facing window. Dark. I crossed to the south-facing window. Dark. But the sound kept building, not louder exactly, but more present, like it was filling the cabin from the walls inward. At 1:47 a.m., the platform camera feed went white. Not static. Not interference. White. A pure, even field of white, like the camera was staring into a blank surface pressed directly against the lens. It lasted 4 seconds. When the image returned, there was a train at the platform. It was stopped. Fully stopped, sitting on the southbound track with its forward cars aligned with the platform edge as if it had pulled in for a station stop. But nothing stops at Harlan Crossing. There's no switching infrastructure, no siding, no reason for any train to do anything but pass through at speed. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I need you to understand that I was fully awake, I was sober, and the platform camera recorded all of it. The train was dark. Not unlit, dark. The cars were a flat, matte black that didn't reflect the platform lights. The platform has 4 sodium vapor lamps that cast everything in that amber-orange wash, and every surface they touch, the concrete, the windows of the waiting room, the track ballast, picks up that color. The train didn't. It sat in the light and stayed black, like it was painted with something that refused to participate in illumination. There were no markings. No railroad logo, no car numbers, no hazmat placards, no end-of-train device blinking red. The cars were a uniform shape, not boxcars, not tankers, not hoppers. They looked like passenger cars. The proportions were right. There were shapes where windows should be, but they weren't windows. They were insets, slightly recessed rectangles in the surface that were the same material as the rest of the car, just set back an inch or two. Like the memory of windows. I counted 9 cars from what the camera could see. The locomotive, if there was one, was beyond the frame to the south. It sat there for 6 minutes. During those 6 minutes, 3 things happened. First, the temperature in the cabin dropped. My space heater was running and I watched the little thermometer on my desk go from 58 degrees Fahrenheit to 51 degrees Fahrenheit to 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Not rapidly. Steadily. Like something was drawing the heat out of the room at a controlled rate. Second, my phone rang. Not the desk phone, my personal cell, which was in my jacket on the hook by the door. It rang twice and stopped. When I checked it afterward, there was no missed call in the log. No record at all. Third, I saw someone on the platform. They were standing at the far north end, near the edge of the camera frame. A figure in dark clothing, motionless, facing the train. They hadn't come from the waiting room, the door was visible on camera and hadn't opened. They hadn't come from the tracks, I would have seen them cross the platform. They were simply there in one frame and not in the prior frame, like a cut in a film. They stood for about 90 seconds. Then they stepped forward, off the platform edge, and descended to track level. They walked alongside the train, slowly, with no urgency, and moved south, out of frame. At 1:53 a.m., the camera went white again. 4 seconds. When it returned, the train was gone. The platform was empty. The temperature in the cabin was 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I sat for a long time. Then I picked up the desk phone and dialed the 10-digit number from the supplemental schedule. It rang once. Passage confirmed, a voice said. Female. Come. Professional. Like an airline gate agent. Train 881204. I said, reading the first ID from the supplemental document. Passage confirmed. Thank you. The line went dead. I want to stop here and be clear about something. I'm not someone who sees things. I'm not prone to fantasy or magical thinking. My ex-wife would did tell me, frequently, that my problem was the opposite. That I was so committed to the literal and the concrete that I couldn't engage with anything I couldn't measure. The platform camera recorded the train. I pulled the footage the next morning and watched it 8 times. The train was there. The figure was there. The whiteout was there. On a system that timestamps and stores video in a continuous loop, the train existed as data. But the signal board never showed it. The rail detection system never registered its weight. The block occupancy indicators stayed green the entire time, which is physically impossible. A train sitting on that track would trigger the circuit and flip the signal to red automatically. There is no override for this. It's a fundamental safety system. A 20-ton chunk of steel on the rails completes an electrical circuit, and the signal changes. That's not software. That's physics. The train either had no weight, or it was never on the rails. But I watched it sit there. On the rails. For 6 minutes. The second supplemental train came through on November 14, 2:22 a.m. Same pattern. Desk vibration, converging rail song, camera whiteout, then the train. This time it sat on the northbound track. Same flat black. Same windowless cars. Same absolute silence, no engine noise, no compressor hiss, no brake squeal from a stop. Nothing. This time, there were 4 figures on the platform. They were spaced evenly, about 10 meters apart, all facing the train. All motionless. All in dark clothing that I couldn't resolve into specific garments, no coats, no hats, just shapes that read as human and clothed. At 2:25 a.m., the nearest figure turned its head toward the camera. I say, it's because I couldn't see a face. The head was the right shape, the right proportions. But where features should have been, there was just the same matte darkness as the train. Not shadow. Not obscured. Absent. Like that part of the image had been cleanly removed and filled with the same non-reflective black. It looked at the camera for 11 seconds. I counted because counting was the only thing keeping me from leaving the cabin. Then all 4 figures moved at once. Same direction, south along the platform, same pace, same stride length, like synchronized swimmers. They stepped off the platform edge and moved alongside the train and out of view. Camera whiteout. 4 seconds. Train gone. I dialed the number. Passage confirmed. What are the people on the platform? I asked. Silence. Then, passage confirmed. Thank you. The line went dead. I called Dale the next morning. Dale, I need to understand what I'm looking at. You're logging and confirming. That's what you're doing. There are people on the platform. With the train. Are they interfering with the train? They're boarding it, Dale. Or walking alongside it. I can't tell. Then they're not interfering. Who are they? The same long pause as before. I could hear him breathing. The supplemental schedule has been active at 7 stations in the network, Dale said finally. You're not the first person to call me about this. I'm going to tell you what I told the others. Do what the document says. Don't signal, don't log in the primary system, call the number. That's the scope of your involvement. Everything outside that scope is not your responsibility. Whose responsibility is it? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. The supplemental schedule comes from above my level, and when I asked about it, I was told it predates the current management structure. That's all I got. It predates us, Marcus. It was here before we were. That's when something changed in me. Not curiosity, I've been curious since the first whiteout. Something more like the feeling you get when you realize the foundation of your house has been cracked for years, and every room you've been living in has been slowly shifting around you, and you just never looked down. November 19th, 3:08 a.m. The 3rd train. I was ready this time. I had a handheld video camera, a personal one, not connected to the station system, set up on a tripod inside the cabin, pointed out the south-facing window. I had a digital audio recorder on the desk. I had a thermometer with a data logging function that I'd ordered online and had delivered to the general store in the nearest town, 30 miles east. The vibration began at 3:01 a.m. The rail song at 3:05. Camera whiteout at 3:08. The train appeared on the southbound track. 9 cars visible, same as the first time. Flat black, featureless, the memory of Windows. I looked at the handheld camera's display. The train wasn't there. The screen showed the platform, the tracks, the sodium lights, the dark tree line beyond. No train. I was looking at the live feed from a camera 3 feet from the window, pointed directly at a physical object I could see with my own eyes, and the camera showed empty tracks. I looked at the platform camera feed on my monitor. The train was there. Clear, defined, sitting on the track. I looked out the window. The train was there. I looked at my handheld camera. The train was not there. The platform camera could see it. My eyes could see it. A personal camera could not. I don't know what category of thing that puts it in. I've thought about it for months and I don't have a framework. It's not a hallucination, because the station camera recorded it. It's not a physical object, because it has no weight and selective cameras can't capture it. It exists in the station's system and in my visual field, and nowhere else. That night, there were 7 figures on the platform. They arrived the same way, not from anywhere, just present between one moment and the next. They stood facing the train. One of them was small. Child-sized. I need to keep going. At 3:12 a.m., one of the figures walked not toward the train but toward the signal cabin. Toward me. It crossed the platform in measured steps, not slow, not fast, just deliberate, and stopped at the base of the cabin steps. There are 4 wooden steps up to the cabin door. The figure stood at the bottom and tilted its head upward. I was standing at the window, looking down at it. It had a face this time. I knew the face. It was Gerald Moran. He'd been the signal operator at Harlan Crossing before me. I'd never met him, but his photo was pinned to the corkboard in the cabin, a staff identification photo, standard issue, with his name typed beneath it. He'd left the position in March, 7 months before I started. Dale had told me Gerald took early retirement. Health reasons. Gerald Moran stood at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me, and his face was right, the shape, the heavy brows, the crooked nose from the photo, but it was flat. Not in terms of expression. Structurally flat. Like a highly detailed photograph printed on the front of a 3-dimensional head. It had depth the way a mask has depth. Everything behind the surface was wrong. He mouthed something. No sound. Just the movement of lips that looked printed rather than grown. He mouthed it 3 times, and the 3rd time I could read it. Your mother's name. Not my mother's name. Not Helen. The phrase. Your mother's name. Like a form field. Like a blank space in a document waiting to be filled. Then the camera went white. 4 seconds. Everything gone. I didn't call the number. I sat in the cabin until dawn, and then I drove 30 miles to the general store and bought a bottle of something I shouldn't have bought, and I sat in my truck in the parking lot and didn't drink it. I held it for 2 hours. Then I poured it out on the gravel and drove back. I called Dale and asked about Gerald Moran. He retired. Is he alive? Why would you ask that? Is he alive, Dale? Another pause. Shorter this time, but heavier. Gerald Moran passed away on October 15, heart failure. I was told not to mention it because the position had already been filled and there was concern it would affect retention. October 15. Yes. The supplemental schedule was sent to me on November 2. Yes. Gerald is on the platform, Dale. The longest silence yet. Nearly 30 seconds. When Dale spoke again, his voice was different. Stripped of the managerial deflection. Just a man on the phone, talking quietly. Marcus, listen to me carefully. The other 6 stations I mentioned. 2 of the operators are no longer with the company. 1 left voluntarily. 1 did not. What does did not mean? It means she went to the platform. During a supplemental passage, she stepped outside the cabin and walked to the platform, and when the camera came back from whiteout, she was gone with the train. Gone. Her car was still in the lot. Her personal effects were in the cabin. The camera footage shows her walking toward the train at 2:41 a.m., and then whiteout, and then empty platform. We filed a missing persons report. The police found nothing because there was nothing to find. Why didn't you warn me? I was told the supplemental trains are harmless as long as you stay in the cabin. That's the operating protocol. Stay in the cabin. Confirm passage. Don't interact. They're not harmless. They knew Gerald's face. They know things. They know your things. That's what the other operators reported. The figures start generic, and then they start looking specific. They pull from you. From your history, your memory, I don't know what to call it. The stuff you carry. I thought about the child-sized figure on the platform. I thought about my daughter. The ones who stayed in the cabin, I said. The ones who followed protocol. What happened to them? They're fine. 4 operators, still working. They confirm passage and they don't look too closely and they're fine. You're telling me to stop looking. I'm telling you that the scope of your involvement is the document. Everything outside that scope will cost you something. I should have listened. I should tell you that I listened. November 23, 12:51 a.m. I was standing on the platform. I'd spent 2 days telling myself I wouldn't, and then I was there, in 19 degrees Fahrenheit air, my breath visible, my boots on the concrete, facing the southbound track. No camera. No recorder. Just me. The vibration came up through the platform surface. Through my soles, into my legs, settling in my chest. Not mechanical. Organic. Like standing on something breathing. The rail song started. Both directions. Converging. And then sound stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The river, the wind, the creak of the cabin door I'd left open, all of it gone. Like someone had pressed mute on the entire valley. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, and it was fast, and it sounded wrong, like it was coming from slightly outside my chest. An inch to the left. An inch forward. The air went white. Not the camera. The air. Standing on the platform, the whiteout happened to me. My entire visual field, white. Not bright. Not blinding. Just absent of everything except a flat, even, depthless white that had no source and cast no shadow because there was nothing left to shadow. 4 seconds. Then the train was there. Up close, it was worse. The surface wasn't paint or metal. I couldn't tell what it was. It absorbed the platform light completely, but it had texture, a fine grain, almost organic, like skin seen under magnification. And it was warm. From 3 feet away, standing in 19 degrees Fahrenheit air, I could feel warmth radiating off the surface of the cars. Body temperature. I would swear to that. It was the warmth of something alive. The recessed rectangles where windows should be, up close, they weren't insets. They were sealed. Something had been there once and had been closed over, grown shut, like wounds that healed flat. I walked south along the platform, beside the train. I could feel the warmth moving with me, like the cars were aware of my position and adjusting. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you what I felt. At the fourth car, there was a door. Not on the other cars. Just this one. A rectangular seam in the surface, slightly ajar, with a thin line of light, warm, amber, domestic light, spilling out through the gap. The kind of light from a lamp in a living room. The kind of light from the house I lost in Billings. I stepped closer. The gap was about 3 inches wide. Through it, I could see a hallway. Not a train corridor. A hallway. Hardwood floors, cream-colored walls, a framed photograph on the wall that I couldn't quite resolve. It looked residential. It looked like someone's home. And at the end of the hallway, there was a doorway into a lit room, and in the lit room, someone was sitting in a chair. From 3 inches of gap, at an acute angle, I couldn't see the person clearly. Just the shape. The posture. The outline of someone sitting in a living room, in a chair, in the amber light, waiting. But I knew the posture. I knew the way the left shoulder sat slightly lower than the right, the way the head tilted just barely forward, the way the hands rested. It was my daughter. Not the child-sized figure from the platform. My actual daughter. 17 years old. Sitting the way she sits when she's reading, in the green chair we used to have, in a room that looked like it was built from my memory of a home that no longer exists. I reached for the door. My hand made contact with the surface and the warmth surged, not hot, not burning, but welcoming, like the heat of another person's palm pressed against yours. The grain of the surface shifted under my fingers. It responded to touch the way skin responds to touch. And from inside the car, from the end of that hallway, my daughter's voice said, "Dad. The door sticks. You have to pull harder." Her voice. Exactly her voice. The cadence, the slight rasp she's had since she was 14, the way she drops the D in dad so it almost sounds like da. Perfect. I pulled. The door moved a 1/4 inch. And then my phone rang. My personal cell, in my coat pocket. It rang, and this time it didn't stop after 2 rings. It kept ringing. I fumbled it out with my free hand, and the screen showed a number I didn't recognize, not the supplemental dispatch number, not anyone in my contacts. A 406 number. I answered. Mr. Hale. A man's voice. Not Dale. Someone older. Step back from the car. Right now. Who is this? You have about 4 seconds before the seal completes and you become part of the schedule. Step back. I didn't step back because he told me to. I stepped back because of the word schedule. Because of what it implied. That the figures on the platform, Gerald Moran, the child, the faceless shapes, weren't passengers. They were entries. Data. They had been people, standing on platforms at remote stations, reaching for doors, and now they were part of the supplemental schedule. Recurring. Logged. Running on a track that doesn't exist for trains that don't exist between stations that serve no earthly destination. I stepped back. The door sealed. The seam vanished like it had never been there. Camera white out, but experienced from the platform, it was different. It wasn't visual. It was temporal. The 4 seconds of white didn't feel like 4 seconds. They felt like a gap. Like time had been cut and spliced, and I was standing on the edit point. The train was gone. I stood on the platform in 19 degrees Fahrenheit air and cried for the first time in over a year. Not because I was scared, though I was scared. Because for 3 seconds, I had heard my daughter's voice, and it had sounded exactly like her, and I wanted it to be her so badly that I almost let a thing I cannot explain take me somewhere I cannot come back from. I called the 406 number back the next morning. It rang and rang. No voicemail. No answer. I tried every day for a week. Nothing. I went back to confirming passages. I stayed in the cabin. I watched the trains come and go through the platform camera, and I didn't look out the window, and I called the supplemental dispatch number and said, "Passage confirmed," and hung up. December came. The schedule continued. Midnight trains, featureless and warm, figures on the platform, whiteouts like temporal surgery. I followed protocol. But the figures changed. Each passage, they looked more like people I knew. Not Gerald Moran anymore. The shapes resolved into specifics: a woman with my ex-wife's shoulders. A man who stood like my father. A child who grew taller, incrementally, passage by passage, until she was exactly 5'6", which is how tall my daughter is. They were building themselves out of me. Not mimicry. Not disguise. Construction. Each passage pulled a little more detail from whatever I carry, memory, attachment, grief, love, and layered it onto the figures like an artist adding detail to a sketch. By mid-December, the figure that looked like my daughter had her walk. By Christmas, it had her hair cut. By New Year's, it turned toward the camera and had her face, and the face wasn't flat like Gerald Moran's. It was dimensional. It was finished. And on January 3rd, my mother called me. My mother, who lives in Tucson. Who I speak to every Sunday. Who has known me as Marcus Hale since I was 6 months old. She called me and she said, "Hi, Daniel." Daniel. The name on my original birth certificate. The one from before the adoption, from a record that was sealed by a court in 1987. The one I've never spoken aloud. The one I've never told anyone, not my ex-wife, not my daughter, not a single person in my life. My mother said, "Hi, Daniel, I just wanted to check in. Are you eating enough up there? The station sounds so lonely." I said, "Mom, where did you hear that name?" And she said, "What name, honey? I've always called you Daniel." She hadn't. She never had. In 41 years, she had never once used that name. "Mom, has anyone visited you? Has anyone come to the house?" "Oh," she said, and her voice took on a warmth that sounded rehearsed. Manufactured. "Your daughter stopped by last week. She's gotten so tall. We had such a nice talk. My daughter lives in Billings with her mother." I called my ex-wife as soon as I hung up. Megan said Emily hadn't gone anywhere near Tucson. Emily had been home all week. Emily was sitting right there on the couch. But she did mention something weird, Megan said. She said she dreamed about a train. A black train with no windows. She said she dreamed she was sitting in your old living room, and she could hear you outside, and she was trying to tell you to come in. I couldn't speak. "Marcus." She said in the dream, she could hear you crying. That was 3 months ago. I'm still at Harlan Crossing. I still confirm the passages. I stay in the cabin. I follow the document. But the document has changed. The supplemental schedule I received in November had 7 trains. The one I received on February 1st had 9. The March schedule had 12. Each new edition has a 6-digit ID number, and I have started to recognize the pattern. Their dates. Reversed. 881204 is December 4, 1988. 770318 is March 18, 1977. 630927 is September 27, 1963. Birthdays. I looked up the missing operator Dale mentioned. Her name was Christine Farrow. She worked at a signal station in eastern Washington. She walked to the platform on August 11, 2023, and disappeared. Her birthday was November 8, 1981. Train 811108 appeared on the March supplemental schedule. There's a new entry on the April schedule. Just added 3 days ago. A train I haven't seen yet, scheduled for its first passage tomorrow night at 2 a.m. Its ID number is 841015. October 15, 1984. That's my birthday. I don't know what it means that I'm on the schedule now. I don't know if I'm expected to be in the cabin or on the platform or on the train. The document doesn't say. The supplemental dispatch number just says, passage confirmed, regardless of what I ask. Dale stopped answering his phone in February. The Missoula hub says he transferred, but they won't say where, and his extension goes to a recording that says the number is no longer in service. My mother calls every few days now. She uses the name Daniel every time. I've stopped correcting her. Last week she described the weather in Tucson and it was accurate. I checked, but she also mentioned that the train came through last night and wasn't it beautiful, and I asked what train and she said, your train, Daniel. I can see it from the kitchen window. My mother's house in Tucson is not near any railroad. My daughter called me yesterday. First time in months. She sounded normal, sounded like herself, asked about work, asked if I was eating enough. And then, right before she hung up, she said, Dad, can you leave the cabin door open tonight? It's easier when the door is open. I said, what's easier? She'd already hung up. It's 11:47 p.m. right now. I have about 2 hours. I'm sitting in the cabin with the door locked and the windows shut and the heater running, and I'm writing this because I want someone to know what happens at Harlan Crossing, and at the 6 other stations, and however many more there are that I don't know about. I'm writing this because at 2 a.m. tonight, a train bearing my birthday as its designation is going to arrive at this platform, and I don't know whether I'm supposed to confirm its passage or be its passenger. But I want you to understand, if I disappear, don't look for me here. Don't look for me anywhere near the tracks. If I become a number on the schedule, I'll come back. Not here. The trains don't take you to nowhere. They take you to the places you're remembered. They take you to the people who carry you. That's the route. That's the destination. The people who love you are the stations. So if someone you love calls and uses a name they shouldn't know. If your daughter mentions a dream about a room that hasn't existed for years. If your mother can see a train from a window that faces away from every rail line in the country. Don't answer. Don't engage. Don't open the door. Because it's not me anymore. Not really. It's what the train made out of what you remember of me. And it will sound exactly right. That's the part that works.